Two for fives over here, baby. Word up. Two for fives. Niggas got garbage down the way. Word up. Everything around me. Green, get the money. Dollar, dollar bill, yo.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It is the Inked Anarchist, and I have a very special episode, which was supposed to be this nice, cool, cut-together, preemptively done video, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to do that because it turns out that my new webcam, which you may notice is way higher resolution, so that's right, you get to see me in creepy high resolution. My new webcam can record at 4K, and apparently, it turns out, hilariously, that my video editing software can't handle 4K, so I can't actually cut together the video the way that I wanted it to cut together. So instead, I am going to be basically setting up my entire thing as, well, a live video. So that should be fun. But here we go, gal. All right, so we are going to start off basically to introduce this. Obviously, today is tax day. It is National Extortion Day. Congratulations, we made it through another year of having our money stolen by the government. And since it is the final day for you, the common serf, to submit to your master's report on how much you earned this year so they can decide just how much of your own money you get to keep, I figured I'd do a nice little, no particular order list of some of my favorite examples of how government spends your money, you know, because today is the day of going, "Please, sir, if it please the crown, might I have back some of the fruits of mine own labor, which thou hast seized, to redistribute as thou seest fit?" But don't worry, that's totally not socialism or anything. So, here we go. Some of the greatest examples of government spending of all time, just to make sure that everybody is thoroughly aware. So here we go. You ready? Let's do this thing. First of all, we're going to go ahead and start with what I like to call the Department of Redundancy department. See, government's layering of new programs on top of old ones inherently creates a lot of duplication. Having several agencies perform similar duties is really wasteful, obviously, and confuses program beneficiaries who have to navigate each program's distinct rules and requirements. Well, some overlap of that is, of course, inevitable. And that's because some agencies are defined by who they serve, so veterans or urbanites, rural families, whatever, and some are defined by what they do, so housing, education, healthcare, economic development, things like that. When those agencies' constituencies overlap, each relevant agency will have its own program. There are 342 separate economic development programs. The federal government really probably should consolidate something, don't you think? I mean, consider the following. These are the federal programs that we're looking at: 342 economic development programs, 130 programs serving the disabled, 130 programs serving at-risk youth, 90 early childhood development programs, 75 programs funding international education, culture, and training exchange activities, 72 federal programs dedicated to assuring safe water, none of which seems to be aware that Flint, Michigan exists, 50 homeless assistant programs, 45 federal agencies conducting federal criminal investigations, 40 separate employment and training programs, 28 rural development programs, 27 teen pregnancy programs, 26 small, largely extraneous K-12 school grant programs, 23 agencies providing aid to the former Soviet republics, 19 programs fighting substance abuse, 17 rural water and wastewater programs in 8 separate agencies, 17 trade agencies monitoring more than 400 international trade agreements, most of those overlap as well, 12 food safety agencies, 11 principal statistics agencies, and 4 overlapping land management agencies, and that's just federal. We're not even counting state at this point. So Do with that what you will. I bet that makes loads of sense to everybody else just the way that it does to me. The next one we're going to go ahead and bring up is this lovely sucker right here. That there is a $300,000 coffee mug. Well, technically it's not $300,000. It actually cost the United States government $300,000 for 391 of them. Yes, that's right. In what world, you have to ask yourself, do coffee mugs go for more than $750 a pop? Well, that special world is the Pentagon, where everything goes for that kind of money. To be fair, these weren't exactly normal mugs. As Reason Zuri Davis explained back in October, the specialty metal mugs can be plugged into aircraft and have the ability to reheat beverages while in flight. But because they have this super weird shape, which I'm going to go ahead and show you again here, that weird shape there apparently makes them super susceptible to breaking. Why? I have no idea. They look like they're made out of metal to me, but according to them, that is in fact the case. Since 2016, the Air Force has spent $326,785 on a whole whopping 391 of those mugs. The exorbitant cost was due to a combination of factors, according to them, rising prices for raw materials, and the best part, the fact that the suppliers who produce the necessary parts to make those don't actually make them normally anymore. Maybe next time the Air Force should just start giving its crews Red Bull. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. The next one is credit card abuse by the DoD. I know that's surprising, but yet true. As we discussed last week and last night on Anarchy Among Friends Roundtable, the Pentagon received an average of one whistleblower complaint every 6 minutes of every day for 5 business days a week for 6 years solid. And these incidents definitely accounted for those. In fact, the Defense Department has uncovered one hell of a credit card scandal. Over one recent 18-month period, Air Force and Navy personnel used government-funded, read you-funded, credit cards to charge at least, brace yourselves, $102,400 for admission to entertainment services, $48,250 for gambling, $69,300 for cruises, and this is my personal favorite, $73,950 for exotic dance clubs and prostitute services. I didn't know hookers took credit cards. Did you guys know that hookers took credit cards? Like, that's revolutionary. Maybe it's only government that gets that kind of cool thing. I have no idea. But hey, whatever, man. More power to you, I guess, if you can get the hookers, but maybe don't do it on a government credit card. Is kind of my thought, right? So, with that being the case, let's go ahead and move on to our next subject, shall we? Which is a little related. They spent more than $300,000 to study bars on the Mexican border. The U.S.-Mexico border is a unique macro context for drinking, with increased alcohol availability due to the lower minimum legal drinking age in Mexico of 18 years, and an increased number of venues for on-premise consumption of alcohol, states a National Institutes of Health grant written during the 2018 fiscal year. Is that really something that the U.S. taxpayer should worry about? Apparently so. The NIH gave the Pacific Institute for Research and Evaluation $333,210 to study the phenomena, and one of the study's goals was, quote, to determine whether younger Mexican Americans in the border cities will be more likely to drink in public venues, such as bars and clubs, than at home and with family, than aged Mexican Americans and whites in valley cities. So, essentially, they spent $300,000 to figure out whether the drinking age being 18 made 18-year-olds more likely to go to a bar to drink than if the drinking age was 21. Meaning that if they went to a bar to drink, it would be illegal. And the bar is required by law not to serve them. Sounds responsible, right? But while we're on that subject, nice segue here, $3 million to study dance clubs. Here's another questionable NIH grant to the Pacific Institute for Research and Evaluation. In 2018, the group got $180,304 to study the high-risk behaviors of young adults who patronize clubs. patronize clubs, whatever. Quote, this project targets young working adults who frequent clubs that feature electronic music dance events, and they actually abbreviate it EMDE, and engage in high-risk behaviors. The grant's public health relevance statement says this, as well as these high-risk behaviors are excessive alcohol use, drug use, physical and or sexual aggression, and unsafe behaviors upon exiting from clubs. So they spent $180,000 to learn whether or not a bunch of drunk college students might be stupid when they leave bars. Gee, I wonder. Well, apparently it's a question worth asking, and it's worth wondering why we had to pay $180,000 for that. But you know what's even worse? The actual number of how much money we put into that is so much higher. It's actually about $2.9 million additional dollars since 2014. So grand total of right up near $3 million to figure out that college students get drunk at dance clubs and then act like idiots. Whoever guessed? But as long as we're talking about idiots, how about the world's most expensive hiring process? In November 2017, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, the CBP, awarded a $297 million contract to an outside company called Accenture. If you're familiar with some of their staffing, that might sound vaguely familiar to you. Well, the idea was that they would recruit and hire 7,500 more border agents in 5 years. Now, granted, fewer border agents isn't necessarily a bad thing, but the spending is. 10 months into the contract, they issued a progress report. The agency had paid Accenture $13.6 million in return for 2 accepted job offers. 2. Now, again, it's not necessarily a bad thing that we have fewer than they expected, but almost $7 million per applicant? This is like the world's most expensive hiring process. Basically, they just burned millions of dollars. The good news, though, is that the CBP did terminate that contract earlier this month. So next, we have another fun one. We have the curious case of the missing $25 billion. Well, I don't know where it went. So, some of you are familiar with this. Buried in the Department of the Treasury's 2003 Financial Report of the United States Government is a short, easy-to-miss section titled Unreconciled Transactions Affecting the Change in Net Position, which explains that there are unreconciled transactions that totaled $24.5 billion with a B billion dollars clear back in 2003. The unreconciled transactions are funds for which the auditors can't account. The government knows that $25 billion was spent by someone, somewhere, on something. But exactly who spent it and where they spent that and on what, no one knows. They blame these unreconciled transactions on the failure of federal agencies to report their expenditures adequately. I know, big shocker. The Treasury report concludes that locating the money should be a top priority. Again, I want to reiterate that this was published in 2003. And it is 16 years later, and no one knows where that money is. But it's a priority. So absolutely. Getting off of the DoD for a minute, let's talk about what I like to call the Dead Comedians Club. The National Comedy Center in Jamestown, New York, which opened in fall of 2018, received $3.525 million from New York State, plus another $1.7 million in federal grants. The Immersive Museum features a look back at influential comedians involving holograms, showing off classic comedians in their heyday. That's right, the federal government funded, with more than $3 million, holograms of comedians. They The feature rotates comedians periodically, including Lucille Ball, who's a Jamestown, New York native. But right now, the more than $3 million attraction features the life story of none other than the very much still alive Jim Gaffigan. What? Oh, and by the way, they also said that they flat out refuse to ever feature George Carlin. So fuck them. Now we come to the International House of Socialism, comrade. The International House of Pancakes got some American love when $500,000 of U.S. Department of Health and Human Services grant went to build an IHOP in a Washington, D.C. neighborhood. And I know what you're thinking. No, this isn't because some fat-ass senator decided that he really needed his pancakes in the morning. This is actually because the initiative was to create a place where they had 70 full-time jobs for low-income workers who qualified for government financial assistance. Because, you know, nothing says I'm on my road to success like a job at the International House of Pancakes. No idea, man. I got nothing on that one. That's just stupid. Ignoring the economic realities of that. IHOP? Really? IHOP. Okay. Well, going on from there, we have a government publication that no one ever reads. I know, it's a shocker. It's a real shocker, but it does, in fact, exist. Although the Federal Register, a daily document that outlines government proposals, decisions, meetings, all that kind of stuff, could theoretically make money through its $929 annual subscription price, most of the copies just go unread. Every member of Congress automatically receives a new copy every single day. Despite the fact that the contents, should they actually want to read it, are in fact free online and completely searchable, by the way. And, of course, you know, members of Congress are so noted for their voracious reading abilities. A bill currently being considered to undo most of that idiocy estimates that not publishing the big pieces of paper that no one ever reads, saving the government more than $1 million for a thing that's already free online. That if they wanted in hard copy, they could literally hit print to get. Like, it's just a button. Like, you can just hit print. You can't tell me that they don't have... Like, can you imagine going to a senator? Hey, you know, Senator, that online thing that you refuse to read, it's available in hard copy. What? I just want to do that again. It's fun. Yeah. So there's another $1 million. And now we come to one of my favorites. One of my absolute favorites. We come to Hamster Fight. Yeah, that's right. Hamster Fight. Bow. Bow before the angry hamster. He will cut you. Yes, hamster fighting. For more than 20 years, Northwestern University researchers received the National Institutes of Health money to watch hamster fights. Yes, hamster fights. We're talking about literal, actual fighting hamsters. A contest of Christianian will, if you will. A duel of positively Lilliputian proportions. They reportedly received more than $3 million over the course of the project and $306,000 last year alone. Some of those experiments involved injecting hamsters with steroids and then putting another hamster in the cage to see if they would increase their aggression as a result. Okay. But it gets weirder. It does get weirder. Despite the fact that, I mean, who isn't curious about what happens when you give a small rodent roid rage. Others investigated whether becoming a trained fighter. Those are the words that they use. Literally, trained fighter. Whether or not training it over the course of 2 weeks of fights would make the little critters more aggressive. Apparently, we're not allowed to do it with dogs or gamecocks, but we could totally do it with hamsters, I guess. Roided out hamsters. The experiments had to stop after animal activists pressured the lab to cut the program. And I really wish I was making this up. And at the same time, my Google search history now features my hunt for my new mini Mad Max villain, Lord Medium. Next, we come to another one that some of you may be familiar with. The quail raves. Yeah, that's right, the quail raves. You heard about them, Rand Paul was right. The government spent at least $518,000 in federal grants to study how cocaine affects the sexual behavior of Japanese quails. The researchers said they had their reasons. They were trying to look at how cocaine abuse affects risky sexual behavior in humans, and the sex habits of quails are apparently easy to observe in a lab. If you're into that kind of thing, I mean, I'm not here to kink shame, man. More power to you, but it's a little weird. I mean, seriously, are you honestly trying to tell me that it took more than $500,000 of the American people's money to see how a bunch of flightless birds on Colombian marching powder reacted to hentai? Next, we have teaching the art of the steal. See what I did there? You know how various federal and local police agencies can take suspected criminals' money and other possessions without ever obtaining a conviction or even actually legitimately charging them? Well, apparently the State Department actually adores that concept to such a massive degree that they've decided that they need to teach other countries how to do it as well. Paraguay's government established an agency in charge of seizing assets back at the very end of 2017, and the US government promptly allocated $400,000 to support the new agency's, and I quote, strong and sound institutional growth from the beginning, and help it become effective at managing and liquidating seized and forfeited assets for the benefit of Paraguayan national interests, end quote. Really hard to tell which is worse, whether or not I am forced to watch as the United States government seizes its own citizens' property arbitrarily with no charges or convictions or due process or anything else, or that I have to watch them steal my money through taxation and then use that to teach other governments how to steal things from people with no conviction or charges or anything. I mean, it's not like a Central American country would ever just, like, I don't know, take everything from everybody and leave them so starving that they would raid a zoo or anything, right? And the last one, but definitely not the least one that I have for today, is what I have decided to refer to as let's smoke, not smoke. Ironically. Le douche. Yes, as you may have guessed from my on-screen graphic, we have one more NIH absurdity for you on the list, and it's a doozy. When the NIH figured out that their anti-smoking ads didn't seem to be resonating with the kids of today, they decided to go straight to the source. Apparently. Hipsters. Yep, that's right. They went directly to Guy Ledouche. Or, as the Commune Project called them, a group focused on the alternative music scene, local artists and designers, and eclectic self-expression. Also, lame hats. The campaign spent $5 million. Picture that number for a moment. $5 million in federal cash on Commune Project branded beer koozies and a whole bunch of other similar swag. smoke-free events featuring indie bands that you've definitely never heard of, artist design flyers, and a whole ton of other useless crap. Another initiative involved literally paying hipster smokers $100 to kick the habit. I would, but this was, cool before you got into it. I mean, seriously? You're paying hipster smokers $100 to try and give up. But not just that, to give it up and then blog about quitting. $100 to do that. That's what they were offering. The hope was that the influencers would spread the anti-smoking message to their friends and make, I kid you not, this is a quote, make smoking uncool. They wanted hipsters to try to make something uncool that they refused to do. Not that they were doing something that they refused to do. Because, nothing says I'm an influencer on the world at large like a twisty mustache. I got nothing, man. I got nothing. Really? You're a dude in a fedora with your twisty mustache and your beard that you completely haven't earned because you can't even change your own oil in your car. Here's a bunch of can koozies with our anti-smoking brand's logo on it and $100. Go ahead and blog your happy little uncool ass off about how you're quitting smoking. I mean, it's like Mr. Burns has decided to run an anti-smoking campaign. What is it that these kids these days are into, Smithers? I believe they're hipsters, sir. Yes, hipsters. Let us get the hipsters to quit smoking. That will teach the children and the youth of today. Excellent. It's absurd. It's absurd. But this kids is the world in which we live today. This is the way that your money is being spent. And today, of all days, on tax day, I felt the need to remind you that you are being forced to hand over a ridiculous amount of your income to people who do these things with it. So if you made it to the end, I definitely want to say thanks. And be sure to check out Anarchy Among Friends Roundtable Discussion on Sundays. Usually every other Sunday, occasionally special episodes. Our last one from last night was definitely awesome. We talked about Julian Assange, and it was a hell of a good episode. So if you get a chance, definitely check that one out, because you definitely missed it because you were watching Game of Thrones, you lame-o. But more importantly, make sure that you also tune in on Wednesdays to my Live at 5 Anarchy Wednesdays. Well, Anarchy Weapons Wednesdays in general, because weapons are my thing. And if you get a chance, check out my YouTube Inked Anarchist page. There aren't any recent videos up there right now because I have been extremely busy just moving and everything else, but there will be very shortly. And soon to come will be at least 2 more, probably 3 more whiskey review videos, with a pretty good variety of cool new liquors for you guys to check out. So if you're into liquors, check that out. I might also do some cigar reviews. I'm debating. I'm not nearly as into cigars as I am into whiskey, but we'll see what direction things go. That is all I got for you guys at the moment. Make sure that you check me out next time. Later. Le douche.